Hi, Greg here for Party Foul. I'm here with Scott behind the camera, and I'm here to talk about competitive versus casual play. And this was a topic that was suggested by a viewer, and at first I was kind of like, it sounds modestly interesting because you're just like comparing the two. What's the difference between the two? Then I got thinking about it, and I got thinking about it in terms of competitive versus casual play, and what is the conflict between those two, and how can we as a community make the two play together better so that they can both be happy, so that we can all go to our local store and play competitive versus casual and stuff like that, and both have a good time. So we're going to look at what is the difference between casual and competitive play, and then I'm going to talk about how we can resolve that. I illustrate this point with an example of the stereotypes of competitive and casual players. So competitive players be all like, dude. So competitive players are like serious, competitive, all out to win, all that type of thing. That's the stereotype. They're like chess players, serious. And the casual players be all like, dude, it don't matter, man, chillax. That's the stereotype of the casual player. I don't think either of them are entirely true. So let's see how we can dispel some of those stereotypes and find a common ground that will allow both of the players to play and enjoy games together. So, point one, War Machine is by its very nature a complete competitive system. That is, it's designed with a tournament format in mind and offers all the necessary information required to play it in a competitive setting. That does not mean it must be played in a competitive manner, but because it is designed with that in mind, it naturally leads its community to believe that players will grow and develop into competitive players. This atmosphere can turn off some new players and cause casual play to be dismissed as using less than the full extent of the rules and to be viewed as somehow inferior to competitive play. This can lead to antagonism between competitive and casual players, but it is misplaced because the goals of competitive and casual players should be the same. I know that doesn't sound right, but I'm going to discuss that more on that later. First, I'm going to talk about what is competitive play. Competitive play, this is my definition, is an environment in which players strive to win through the full use of rules and scenarios. So, who is the competitive player? The competitive player strives to be as good as or better than others of comparable nature. They also strive to better themselves personally. The things that competitive players do are, it's going to be like bullet point sort of things. They play regularly and as frequently as possible. They seek to replicate the competitive environment as much as possible. They play with a clock. They play 50-point formats, sometimes exclusively. They do not allow take-backs, but can alter declarations if nothing in the table state has altered. And that's a common sort of thing to do. They play scenarios. They use competitive lists, or at least they believe to be competitive. And they play the same list or the same list pairing over and over again to sort of practice them. They prep for tournaments and events. They go to tournaments and events. They seek out challenges and competitive caster opponents. They seek out mastery of the rules and factions. Competitive players do not necessarily have issues with losing. In fact, competitive players look forward to challenges and learn more from losing than winning. They look for challenging games and plays that stretch their competitive muscles. So that's the competitive player. What is casual play? Casual play is playing on an infrequent basis. This is a definition I pulled from the internet mostly. So playing on an infrequent basis, friendly and not quality. Strive for fun over win. Who is the casual player? The casual player is relaxed, unconcerned, a person who does something irregularly. I'm going to give you the bullet points now. It varies in degrees more so than the competitive player definition. Everything is optional in a way. It's up to the players to discuss and decide how much leeway is given for takebacks, etc. Can play a variety of formats. Relaxed, no clocks, takebacks, give-me's, open discussion about the game and situation options. Generally less experienced and knowledgeable than competitive players. And they don't or infrequently go to tournaments. They either don't go to a tournament or they infrequently go to tournaments. They play non-competitive casters and builds and poke fun at people who do. So, when I was doing this, I thought, okay, I'm going to discuss what the dark side of competitive play is. But I think this is a complete misconception. Competitive players, at least the competitive players that I know, aren't necessarily aggressive whacks. That's win-at-all-costs sort of players. It's a misnomer. It's more the dark side of players. A dark player is somebody who is win-at-all-costs, who is impolite, and who is a poor sportsman. That gets me to the point of what should competitive and casual players share in common. And that thing, the most important thing, and I think one of the most important things for competitive players as well, is etiquette. And Scott's going to do a video on this, but I'm going to talk briefly about the important points of etiquette. Scott's giving me the finger. I'm not trying to steal his thunder here. This is very brief. You should be polite and respectful. Use declarations and intent, clear communication, be honest and concise, and use precision and accuracy in your measurements. All types of players should strive to do that, whether you're competitive or casual. So how can competitive players enjoy a game with casuals and vice versa? Since both types share the commonality of etiquette, it is possible. Recognize and communicate the style of play that each player is comfortable with. So if you're a casual player and you're not comfortable with playing with a clock, just tell your opponent, I'm not quite ready to play with a clock, or I just don't like playing with a clock. Make concessions. If you're that competitive player and you like playing on a clock, be like, hey dude, that's okay. I'm going to clock myself just so I can, track how I'm doing with the clock, but don't worry about clocking yourself. Also, feel free to use different lists, things that you want to experiment with. Also, discuss how to handle forgotten rules and feats and such. When I was doing this, I saw a post on the Troll Bloods Facebook forum and Facebook group or whatever, and they were talking about this subject. And one of the things that came up from that was somebody said the idea of mulligan cards, said their group uses mulligan cards. So instead of playing a game where it's unknown how many take-backs or give-me's or mulligans you can call, you get a certain number of cards. So as a competitive player, you might be like, okay, I'll take the cards just to be polite, but I'm not going to use them. But the casual player may feel like, oh, I forgot my feet. This is really bad. I'll use my mulligan card. So there's a bit of safety in that. And I thought it was a great idea. So both players should recognize the level of play that your opponent is comfortable with, and don't look at take-backs or give-me's as unprofessional play. Look at it as your opportunity to play at a higher level and a more challenging game because you've graciously allowed your opponent a handicap to make up for their inexperience. You're not going to learn much if you just play with a casual player and he makes a couple of key mistakes and you rickroll him as a result. There's nothing to be gained from that. Try to get your opponent to play at a higher level by making more concessions. It's not a weakness in you, it's going to help strengthen you because you're going to have to play against more adversity. And that's a good thing as a competitive player. You want to play challenging games. So seek out games with all types of players. You are only as good as the width of your meta. Do not be above it. And that includes meaning within your meta, within your game group, within your store, there's going to be the competitive level of players, the veterans and stuff like that. And there's going to be the inexperienced, more casual players. Those inexperienced casual players are still going to stretch your imagination. They're still going to bring up questions that are going to be intriguing and you might not have thought about thoroughly. So you will be strengthened as a competitive player by playing games against more people, whether they're casual or competitive. So why does it matter? Why even do a video about this? And I asked myself this when I first got the request. A lot of people view War Machine as a progression towards playing a tighter game and a journey towards a more competitive play style. This simply isn't true of all players, but what should be true is that every player needs to strive towards perfecting their etiquette and sportsmanship. Any game can be used to practice those all-important traits. What is also true is that we aren't always playing in a tournament and don't always have to be sticklers for everything. Casual and friendly games are an opportunity to teach and develop as much as, or in some ways more so, than super tight competitive games. Be open to relaxing or tightening your game up a bit because the more people you include in your gaming experience, the happier and more successful you'll be. And who knows, you might make a few friends along the way.
In War Machine?